Hello and welcome to Nexus Extra. This week we've been looking at President Trump's battle with the big social media giants, in particular with Twitter, his favorite form of communication directly with the American public. Twitter has censored for the first time the American president, saying that one of his tweets needed to be fact-checked. Later, it actually hid one of his tweets, saying that it glorified violence. President Trump has hit back with an executive order. What does this all mean, though? Let's go to Roger Kiska now. He is an American lawyer, and he's been keeping an eye on this story. Roger, welcome to Nexus Extra. Let me ask you right at the beginning, why do you think, after all these years of people asking Twitter to censor the president, they have gone and done it now?
Well, it's correct. I mean, he's been president for 3.5 years now. I think the only reasonable conclusion would be that there's an election around the corner. And this is one of the complaints about political bias that President Trump has, is that it is less than ironic to have this happen right now, just months away from an election. There's been no censorship done of any Democrat, Vice President Biden or otherwise.
Let's deal with one of the specifics here. So the tweet that was censored, or rather fact-checked, depends on your definition of censorship, was when he said mail-in ballots would lead to substantial election fraud, perhaps even a rigged election. Was it actually factually incorrect in the first place?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's important to distinguish fact from opinion. And what President Trump was expressing was clearly an opinion. And the whole purpose of free speech and platforms like Twitter is to open into dialogue and get differing views about things like this. Now, it is fact that there has been ballot harvesting, there has been election fraud through these measures. So he was correct about that. So the statement that this is inaccurate or somehow unfactual is demonstrably false. So the fact checking was clearly biased in that sense.
And let me ask you on a point of law, the second censorship strike, if you like, was about a tweet in which he said, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, in reference to some of the protests and riots happening in the United States. They said it was glorifying violence. Well, what does that mean? What does the reference mean? And is it actually a crime to glorify violence on Twitter, even if it was doing so? Because there are many examples of violence and glorifying violence in terms of rhetoric on Twitter as it is.
Yeah, again, this is clearly hyperbole on the part of the president. This is evidenced by the fact that police haven't opened shooting despite mass riots. Hate speech, first of all, and the glorification of violence is protected by the First Amendment, so it's not criminal in any sense of the word. Second of all, this type of stuff happens on Twitter all the time. I think if you look up certain rappers, for example, and their Twitter accounts, you'll find all sorts of glorification of violence, and not just rappers, but any member of society. There's all sorts of violent tweets directed at President Trump and his family, and that seems to pass Twitter standards. So there's clearly political and viewpoint discrimination at play in their decision to who to censor and who not to censor.
Okay, but at the end of the day, the argument is they're a private company, they're allowed to do this.
Well, and it's a fact, they are a private company, they're allowed to do this. But on the other hand, the executive order speaks to Section 230C, subsection 2 of the Communications and Decency Act 1996, which gives immunity from civil liability to such social media providers. So that is a privilege and not a right. And if the government feels that you're abusing that privilege to censor free speech, then they have every right to remove that privilege.
And do you expect, or rather, what do you expect will happen as a result of the executive order?
Well, the executive order calls on the FCC to look at Section 230 and see where people are showing in Twitter, Facebook, whatever the provider is, are showing inherent bias as to what opinions are allowing, what opinions they're not allowing. So when bias is shown, then they are looking at ways of removing immunity, that Section 230C2 immunity from civil liability, And they're looking at ways of removing government funding. So any federal government funds to advertising on those platforms would also be forbidden.
Well, we shall see if this change actually happens. There are some lawsuits against it. In the meantime, Roger Kiska, thank you very much for your analysis, and thank you for watching at home this latest edition of Nexus Extra. Do watch the full show. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Well, thanks for watching our program. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family, and even subscribe.